let's talk webinar show rates, because if you can have the best webinar in the world, but if no one shows up, you're not going to make any sales at all. So I'm going to walk you through the 3-step process that we use to maximize webinar show rates, maximize the conversion rates on the webinar because of what happens before the webinar, and then maximize the amount of people that end up purchasing after the webinar is finished. I'm going to show you the whole process in this video. So firstly, the first step is the webinar reminder sequence, right? So to get people actually to show up for the webinar, you need to create incentives for them to show up, but you also need to create the right reminders for them to show up. So here's how we do it in our business and with our clients. So firstly, as soon as they opt in and register, we send them a voicemail drop. Now, that voicemail drop, if you don't know what voicemail drops are, it's a ringless voicemail that goes to your phone that will typically like ring once when it comes through, and it'll just go ring, and you go, I got a missed call, and then it leaves a voicemail straight away. And the reason that we do that is because it builds a connection with the speaker's voice. So whoever's presenting on the webinar, you want to have that connection where they've actually heard that voice before they get to the webinar, because it's building a more personal connection there. And that isn't selling in that voicemail drop. It is very simply just walking them through like what to expect on the webinar and why, and you're building that excitement and that hype for the webinar. Okay. Then we send a confirmation email immediately. Make sure we're getting them to follow the steps that we want them to follow. So the steps that we want them to follow, number one is we want them to add it to their calendar. So it's going to come up as a reminder when it's time for it to go live. Number two is we want to make sure that they are consuming the pre-frame information. I'll go through what that means in a minute. Then we're also going to send an SMS immediately. So we're going to send that a confirmation SMS to say, hey, confirmed you're in, blah, 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 blah. And just give them all the relevant information. You don't want to go too heavy in that SMS, but again, it's like, make sure you add it to your calendar, etc. So look at the key things that are going to maximize that conversion rate and make sure that they are in that first SMS. Then 48 hours before, we're going to send an email starting to build that pre-hype. 24 hours before, we're going to send another email, 1 hour before, and then 15 minutes before as well. And then also 15 minutes before, we could send a voicemail drop and an SMS 15 minutes before. So it's quite a lot of reminders that go on there, but you want the people to turn up. So when you're sending the reminders, if you literally just go in, reminder, webinar's coming up, reminder, webinar's coming up, we want to be reminding them of the reason why they signed up in the first place, and also giving them value along the way. So that's where having a pre-frame sequence comes into play. So the pre-frame sequence is you have 3 videos that happen before the webinar. Now, it doesn't matter if they don't watch all of these. If they just watch one of them, that's fine. If they watch none of them, it's still okay. Like, it's not going to wreck your conversion rates. These are just conversion enhancers for your webinar. So the first pre-frame one is like teasing the first thing that they're going to learn on the webinar, right? So you can use these pre-frame videos. Basically, you create separate thank you pages, and on each one of those, you're going to have a video that you can send them back to, where at the bottom of each one, it's going to have the same things of join the community, download any workbook, and then have social proof about the webinar and all the benefits that people got out of that. But in those pre-frame videos, you're going to like start to break through some of those false beliefs, break through some of those objections before you even get to the webinar. So for example, the whole, will it work for me? Well, if you've got a video that shows a case study of how it worked for someone that's maybe in the similar demographic to them, or maybe in a demographic, like, for example, you may have had someone who was 85 who went through the program, and it's like, wow, if they can do it, I can do it. You might have someone that was 15 years old. If they can do it, I can do it, right? You may have had someone that came through that had no money, maybe they were homeless or whatever, right? So what you want to look at is the most extreme examples, because then it gets them to go, okay, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And then the second pre-frame video, you're going to break through more of those limiting beliefs as well. So it might be how to like break through that time belief, right? Or the money belief. And you show some examples of how you can break through those things. And it's pre-framing as well what's to come on the webinar. So you're not giving away everything that you're giving away in the webinar. However, you might show a little section of it. So for example, let's say you've done a previous webinar that's got great results for people off the back of them being on that webinar. Then maybe you can show a little bit of like what was learned there, and then how that's going to apply to what you're about to learn. And then the pre-frame video 3, again, like you just build it around the same kind of things. So you want 3 videos on there that are driving people towards the sale overall. And then it's going to increase the overall show up rate of people turning up to the webinar. So then on your initial thank you page, so as soon as they have registered, you want the video outlining, hey, these are the next steps. And we're not going to say watch the pre-frame videos. We're going to say watch it, like, and position them as bonuses or gifts. I've got some extra bonuses for you. So number 1, add to your calendar. Number 2, download the fill in the work roadmap or workbook. And then number 3, watch the pre-frame videos. So each one of those is really going to help drive things forward. So once we've done that and we've got people to show up, then we drive people to the registration sequence. So we've also got the registration sequence here, right? So this is like actually getting people to register for the webinar, because like no one's going to show up if you don't have anyone register for it. So our registration sequence goes something like this: 5 days before, we run 3 days before, we run 2 days before, 1 day before, 1 hour before, and then at the time the webinar goes live, we say, hey, we're live in the room. Are you going to join us? Now, disclaimer on this: if you are doing like 10 webinars a month, you're probably not going to do all of this. So like we've worked with a client partner at the moment, and we're doing like 10 webinars, live webinars every month, alongside evergreen ones as well. So when we're doing all those webinars, if we send all this to the list every single time, we're just going to burn the list out. So what we do is actually do like sometimes we do the 2 days before if we've got a bigger break, but quite often it's like the 1 day before, 1 hour before, and then at the time. So by doing this, you want to start breaking down, and I'll show you a little example here. You want to start building that hype in advance. So like talking about like the negative consequences of not doing this, like talking about the benefits, breaking down what they're going to discover. And when you're breaking down what they're going to discover, you want to create some open loops into that process. So what I mean by open loops is you create something like da, 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 and now your brain wants to go da, da, right? That's an open loop. It's the same kind of thing when you are creating a registration sequence. You want to create a loop where they get the answer to that by joining the webinar. And the better the offer is for the webinar, the more people are going to attend as well. So you're going to get a higher registration rate, but you're also going to get higher show rates. So think about what else as well you can offer to make that overall offer better, while it's not just attracting freebie seekers. So that's the registration sequence. So that's phase 2. So phase 1, making sure you have the right reminder sequence. Phase 2, making sure you have the right registration sequence. Phase 3, making sure you have the right replay sequence. So when you are doing a replay sequence, you want to put people into 3 buckets. So you've got, they registered for the webinar, but missed it. They registered for the webinar and attended, but left before the pitch. And then they attended the webinar and saw the pitch, but didn't buy. Okay, so we want to put the people in these 3 buckets. So if they attended the webinar but missed the webinar altogether, then we want to send an email 1 hour after that will send them back to the webinar replay. Note on that webinar replay page, you also want to have either the link to the offer, right, directly as a button, or you can have the order page on there and a load of social proof that comes up. The reason for that is because otherwise you're just going to lose those people if you're trying to send them back to an order page through email. If they've gone to the replay page, give them the option to order on that page. Secondly, 24 hours after the webinar, you want to send them back to the webinar again. And then thirdly, 47 hours after the webinar, you want to send them to a pitch-only version of the webinar. So if they have watched then any of the replay, you want to then drive them to a pitch-only version. So where it's just like, hey, I wanted to share everything you're going to get kind of stuff, right? And then you can also get them to attend to the next webinar and the next webinar and the next webinar. So the reason we don't go too heavy with those people who missed is because like there's more, you're going to have more shots, right? You can go again. You can go again. However, if you burn them out with that first time round when they haven't seen the offer at all, then it's not going to work out well in the long term because they're just going to get burnt out and then they're going to unsubscribe. So secondly, if they registered and attended before they left the pitch, we send them back to the webinar, and then we do the same kind of process, right? And we send them back to a pitch only version. You can potentially, if they saw most of the content, and it depends, if you saw the most of the content, you can send them back to a pitch only version on that first email of just like, hey, here's everything that's included kind of thing. And then registered for the webinar and attended and saw the pitch, then we're going to send them straight to the offer afterwards, and then we're going to focus on a cart close offer sequence. So the offer sequence, first one is like, here's everything you get. Second one is testimonials, and then tell them that the offer, the bonuses on the offer is expiring. Don't do fake scarcity. It's a stupid idea. Like, just be ethical, because you want to build long-term relationships with your customers. So what you can do is say, hey, we've only got 50 copies of this, and you can create it as like a product with an inventory on your order form. So as soon as it's sold out, it then that bonus disappears, right? So you can do it that way, or you can create a deadline funnel, whichever way you want to do it, but create some level of urgency into the webinar, because you're going to get a higher conversion rate. Then you've got testimonials, right? So talking about different testimonials and case studies and stories. Really, you want to be, so when we say testimonials, we want to be telling stories in those emails where it's like, oh wow, that builds an emotion. Then from there, 36 hours after the webinar, we then run FAQs and answer all those FAQs and those objections that those people might be having. And really, it's not even objections, they're just fears and insecurities. And then we have 47 hours after the webinar, last chance bonuses closing in 1 hour. What I'd recommend with the last chance one is sometimes we'll go and put 3 or 4 emails on that day instead. It depends, again, how much they've consumed. So if they consume the whole pitch, then it's worth having 3 emails, like one at like 6 hours before cart close, one at 3 hours, one at 1 hour, and then one at 15 minutes. And then having the deadline timer actually in the emails of each one of those, and that helps drive things forward. So that is the 3-step process of how we maximize show rates. This pre-frame, don't underestimate the value of putting a pre-frame in there, because you're going to bring a better quality of person coming through who's already has built a level of know, like, and trust with you, and the show rate increases, and overall then the sales increase because of that. So step number 1 is create the right webinar reminder sequence. Step number 2 is create the right webinar registration sequence. And then step number 3, separate it out into 3 buckets and have the correct webinar replay sequence to drive the maximum amount of sales. So try that out for yourself. And if you want a load of free trainings and a load of other tools of all our best stuff for free, just comment the word trainings below this video and I will send that over to you for free.